to see the concert tonight? It's gonna happen fast, and you're not gonna get it all. And you might even hear the wrong word. But you wanna tell other people that, go ahead and tell them.
Rock and roll icons who once dominated audiences with their explosive performances and defiant attitude are now in their 90s. These legendary performers who were once emblems of rebellion, youth, and independence now must confront the facts of aging.
When she reached my age, she said, I am now old enough to say and do whatever I want to do, so shut up.
These rock stars' current lifestyles are in stark contrast to their turbulent histories, what with their health problems and their desire for a life away from the limelight. Come with us as we explore the lives of 35 legendary rock and roll musicians who are now in their 90s, shedding light on the poignant realities of their twilight years and the indelible mark they made on the annals of music. Ray Davies. On July 15, 1973, legendary Kinks leader Ray Davies hit rock bottom. He was in a pit of despair when his wife Rasa abandoned him and their 2 small girls. His fiancée saw a disturbing change in Davies's demeanor only hours after he performed with the Kinks. A terrifying sign of his intentions was the subsequent exposure of a medication container that was empty. An emergency trip to the hospital resulted in the life-saving stomach pump for Davies. He would subsequently admit that this was an attempt at suicide. His music and lyrics would be profoundly impacted by this event, which would add an element of vulnerability that resonated with people on a deeper level. His subsequent works revealed a more contemplative side, delving into topics of grief, remorse, and recovery. Because he was ready to share his anguish with his audience, his music took on a deeper meaning and touched them more deeply. He went on to say that this low point marked the start of his climb out of depression. Despite Rasa's unreturned affections, Davies was able to mend fences with his brother, and the Kinks kept playing music together all the way into 1996. Writing and acting were 2 of Davies's artistic pursuits, as he re-established his life and found new methods to deal with his trauma. He was able to keep finding meaning and release outside of music by branching out into other creative areas. A show up north in Sheffield that night was our performance, he reflected as he recounted the event. We entered the studio at 1 o'clock, recorded and completed the vocals in around 3 hours. Loretta Lynn. Loretta Lynn is an iconic figure who is often mentioned while discussing the golden age of country music. Over the course of nearly 7 decades, she became a legend in the genre after amassing an amazing 16 #1 songs. Although Lynn had achieved great success, her life was everything but idyllic. Deep sorrow and adversity marked her life. She was devastated when her mentor and friend Patti Cline perished in an airplane tragedy in 1963. Jack Benny, her cherished son, tragically died in 1984 after crashing his horse into a rock as he attempted to ford a river. After a long battle with sickness and erratic behavior, her husband Oliver Mooney died of congestive heart failure in 1996, little over 10 years later. The defeats persisted. 3 years after her daughter Betty Sue died of emphysema in 2013, her grandson Jeffrey, the eldest son of Jack Benny, died suddenly on the family property in Tennessee. The 1998 deaths of Lynn's manager Owen Bradley and her collaborator Conway Twitty, both at the age of 59, added insult to injury for Lynn. Lynn and Mooney's marriage was notoriously unstable. Even though they were married for 48 years, he had problems with drinking, adultery, and bad money decisions, so Lynn had to take a lot of the strain. Lynn and her 6 children were able to make ends meet during her many years of traveling. Despite Mooney's continued drinking and womanizing, she developed her own addictions, most notably to sleeping medications, due to the stress of her troubled marriage. Recently, her health problems reappeared, forcing her to postpone the release of her record and cancel a tour. Lynn, a genuine American legend who has persevered through it all, was in good spirits when we last saw her at Nashville's Ernest Tubb record shop. Country music's undisputed monarch, sometimes called the coal miner's daughter, has maintained her position for decades. Paul McCartney. It would be impossible to deny the impact that Paul McCartney had on 20th century music and popular culture. Paul McCartney was an integral part of the Fab Four's meteoric rise to fame as rock and roll gained widespread popularity. After his mother's death from breast cancer in 1956, his life took a dramatic and irrevocable turn. When his wife Linda had the same diagnosis in 1995, sadness struck once more. Linda McCartney died of breast cancer on April 17, 1998. McCartney's mother had died of the same disease many years before. Following her death, McCartney wed Heather Mills, a model and media personality, and the couple had a daughter, Beatrice. Their unhappy marriage lasted only 6 years before it terminated, and the tabloids chronicled every detail of their divorce. Remembering his musical journey, McCartney reflected, "The first time I performed, it was incredibly emotional, and it continues to be because it feels like I'm singing with my old friend again." Randy Newman. American singer-songwriter Randy Newman has achieved legendary status for his contributions to cinematic and popular music. Famous for his work on The Princess and the Frog, Meet the Parents, and a plethora of Pixar masterpieces including Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., Cars, and Og's Quest, Newman's compositions have become landmarks. Notable songs that he has composed include Short People, You've Got a Friend in Me, and We Belong Together. Topics like racism, nuclear dangers, and the complexity of human pain frequently appear in Newman's lyrics, which frequently reflect underlying worries. Personal difficulties, such as the dissolution of his 18-year marriage and the passing of his mother, have occurred in the years subsequent to his most recent pop album. As part of his Land of Dreams trilogy, which details his life up to the age of 5, Newman wrote songs like Dixie Flyer, New Orleans, Wins the War, and 4 Eyes, which beautifully capture his emotional infancy. These songs provide an uncommon window into his emotional battles and the segregation he experienced as a Jewish youngster in the American South. John Cale. The legendary solo career and groundbreaking contributions as a member of the Velvet Underground have brought Welsh musician, songwriter, and producer John Cale widespread renown. An illness of TB while still a young man was one of many unusual obstacles that Cale overcame on his path to becoming a musician. The medicine he took for his sickness was spiked with opium, which made him feel extremely high and gave him hallucinations. His subsequent heroin experiments and musical forays were all rooted on these formative encounters. Music was never Cale's strong suit. He was unique among rock musicians due to his classical training, and he contributed depth and complexity to the Velvet Underground's sound. He expanded the expressive possibilities of rock music by including avant-garde elements, experimenting with dissonance, and employing minimalist frameworks. His music was distinctive for being both technically demanding and emotionally impactful, since he was not afraid to tackle heavy subjects in his lyrics and music. People believe that direct communication is aggressive, but it's not. Cale once said this in reflection of his method. "It's about bringing up taboo topics, and we've managed to do it with relative ease. I truly value that." This outlook permeated his music as well. He frequently took a stance in his compositions on taboo subjects, such as mental health, addiction, and identity. Cale's music continues to be honest and unfiltered, urging listeners to bravely confront difficult realities. Pete Townshend's early life was especially difficult, although all of the Who members had their fair share of hardships and tragedies. While discussing the tumultuous life of his performing parents in an interview with Rolling Stone published in 1993, Townshend reflected on their tumultuous relationship. After his parents split up when he was a little boy, he had to endure 2 tough years of living with his cruel and mentally ill grandma. According to Townshend's 2012 biography, Who I Am, he reminisced about disturbing recollections, such as being abused by a male boarder while residing with his grandmother. Accusations of possessing child pornography landed him in legal hot water later on. Ultimate Classic Rock cites his statement in which he explains that he had no ill will and was only doing research for his memoirs when he was absolved of all accusations following an inquiry. "The Who aren't the same as they were," he said in a past interview about his band. We used to record our background tracks in a studio with a piano player, Keith Moon, John Entwistle, and myself, Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono's marriage to John Lennon is partly responsible for her meteoric rise to fame as the most renowned unknown artist in the world. Everyone seemed to be blaming her for the dissolution of the Beatles, and her relationship with Lennon took center stage. Although it was not always to her benefit, Ono's reputation eventually got intertwined with Lennon's. She temporarily severed ties with Lennon in an effort to rediscover her origins after fearing she was losing her creative drive. When she found out she was pregnant, they reconciled and had a son, Sean Lennon. Ono went into seclusion after Lennon's terrible murder at the hands of Mark David Chapman. It was not until the late 1980s that she emerged and began her artistic endeavor. Bobby Rush. One of the longest-serving blues and R&B performers still playing today is Bobby Rush, whose career spans more than 7 decades. There have been other near-death experiences during his quest, including a gas explosion and a bus tragedy. In addition to dealing with constant bigotry and a drug conviction that landed him in prison, he did it all while working. Rush frequently thinks about how record labels passed him over, which he says was due to racism. Tragically, he was the sole survivor of his immediate family after suffering the deaths of 3 sisters-in-law, 2 children, his wife, and a son. In spite of all, he persisted in life and music, and he remarried and had a son more, Dionne Warwick. Dionne Warwick is still a major player in the music business despite being born on December 12, 1940. She has proven herself to be an adaptable and strong musician throughout the course of her career, which has taken her from pop to R&B to gospel to adult contemporary. Warwick has had major financial problems, nevertheless, despite her achievements. Because of her chronic fiscal mismanagement, she amassed over $10 million in tax debt beginning in 1991 and eventually filed for bankruptcy. Her illustrious and tenacious career includes this financial difficulties as one chapter. Chubby Checker. Chubby Checker's The Twist became a cultural sensation after its 1960 debut, which topped the charts. Checker has said that The Twist hurt his nightclub career, but he turned it into a heritage icon by capitalizing on its fame. Checker still makes occasional appearances, saying the song had a major influence in the 20th century. Checker has maintained his relevance long after The Twist has faded from memory. He still sings "Come On, Baby" to admirers all over the globe and does infrequent performances and even endorses beef jerky. Keith Richards. The legendary status of Keith Richards' decades-long drug and alcohol use is well-deserved. His sole sobriety came after a shocking occurrence in 2006, when he broke his skull after falling from a tree while collecting coconuts. He was known for pushing the boundaries of excess. He had to have surgery on his brain because of the accident. In 1976, Richards suffered the terrible death of his 10-week-old son Tara, among other misfortunes. His bandmates' encouragement and his love of playing rescued him from the depths of despair when he was devastated. Coming back to the stage and performing music brought him comfort and healing. Steve Miller. Steve Miller, whose sound combines blues and rock, was wary of the music business even as a child. In spite of his great success and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, Miller has encountered several obstacles in the music industry. Miller has always been methodical and meticulous when dealing with the sector. Until he discovered a deal that worked for him, he notoriously declined record opportunities. By keeping a tight rein on his music and public persona, Miller has made sure that his band is never on sale. "I realized early on that saying no was a powerful tool in negotiation," he stated once. Welcome to the Vault, his most recent box set, is an assemblage of his work that has been painstakingly preserved throughout the years. Joni Mitchell. Joni Mitchell has been a significant figure in music for almost 60 years. She is fearless, self-reliant, and never hesitant to say what's on her mind. Mitchell had a short affair with the dashing artist Brad McMath when she was a teenager. She found out she was pregnant soon after. Mitchell was abandoned and left to fend for herself when McMath discovered she was pregnant. She had her daughter, Kelly Dale Anderson, in Toronto after fleeing her parents' displeasure and being unable to provide for a kid. Because Mitchell couldn't afford to raise her baby, she had to make the difficult decision to place her for adoption. This decision would haunt Mitchell and provide the musical basis for many of her very moving songs. Mitchell had many high-profile romances when she was fully engaged in the free love movement of her day. David Crosby, Graham Nash, James Taylor, Leonard Cohen, Jackson Browne, and Warren Beatty were among her renowned companions. Mitchell was vulnerable to the temptations of excess due to her successful career and her troubled romantic life. Her health and her ability to sleep were both severely affected by her 1975 cocaine addiction. Overcoming her addiction was a long process for Mitchell. After being discovered asleep in her Los Angeles home in March 2015, she encountered a serious health issue. After a lengthy recuperation and stint in critical care, tests confirmed she had a crippling brain aneurysm. Jimmy Page. As far as rock guitarists go, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin is up there with the best of them. Page has had a personal life that has caused controversy at times, yet he is known for his spectacular concerts and famous riffs. A string of personal relationships ensued as a result of Page's reputation. Nevertheless, he came under heavy fire for his pursuit of a connection with Lori Maddox, who was 14 years old at the time while he was 28 years old. This facet of his private life continues to stir debate, despite his numerous musical accomplishments. Brian Wilson. Fame has begotten Brian Wilson, one of the Beach Boys' co-founders, for his innovative songs and powerful voice. Still, he battled mental illness throughout his life. Wilson shifted his concentration from performing live to creating and producing music after suffering a mental breakdown in 1964. His struggles with substance misuse, binge eating, and isolation plagued him throughout the late 1960s, impacting both his personal and professional life. The controversial relationship that Wilson had in the 1980s with psychotherapist Eugene Landy had a profound impact on Wilson's music and his life in general. After parting ways with his collaborator in 1991, Wilson enthusiastically resumed his solo career. In an interview, Wilson discussed his creative process, saying, "There are times I can't hear any music at all, and other times I hear a full record produced in my head." Roger Waters. After founding songwriter Syd Barrett left the band in 1968, Roger Waters, the renowned guitarist who co-founded Pink Floyd, assumed a new position within the group. From its formative years until his departure in 1985, Waters guided Pink Floyd as its songwriter, co-lead vocalist, and creative leader. David Gilmour, main guitarist for Pink Floyd, and Waters have been at odds ever since. Following their breakup, the band's name and legacy became the subject of many court fights. Even though they briefly reunited, there has been nothing indication that they are willing to reconcile. Waters and Gilmour's strained relationship has impacted the band's history, and fans are left to question whether they will ever put their differences aside. Mick Jagger. Over the course of 5 decades, Mick Jagger has enchanted audiences as the magnetic lead singer of the Rolling Stones. Among his several famous romances, his 10-year affair with fashion designer Laurie Scott is among the most tragic. Laurie killed herself in March 2014, and Jagger was distraught. Following their breakup, Jagger discussed his feelings about returning to music production. "We'd been recording, making lots of music, but I kept wondering, was it good or was it great? We would only release an exceptionally remarkable record if we were serious about doing so." His determination to achieve has been the driving force behind his long-lasting profession. Ringo Starr. Along with Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and George Harrison, Ringo Starr became famous as a member of the Beatles. In addition to being one of the most iconic drummers of all time and a household name throughout the world, he also happens to be the wealthiest drummer in history. After the breakup of the Beatles in 1970, Ringo's life and career were overshadowed by his battle with substance abuse for over 20 years. During that time, Starr's addictions consumed him to the point that he missed entire periods of time until he eventually got treatment in 1988. The fact that Ringo has been sober for more than 30 years since then is a testament to his dedication to health and wellness. In order to overcome his addiction, He had to face the root reasons of his problem, which demanded introspection and strength of character. As time went on, Starr started doing better for himself, finding comfort in things like painting that gave him a new outlet for expression. Beyond his own healing, Starr cared deeply about the health of others. Since then, he's spoken out frequently about his struggles with addiction and mental health in an effort to aid others going through the same things. Today, Starr's impact extends beyond music. It stands as a testament to the power of personal growth and the possibility of redemption in the face of adversity. For many of his admirers all throughout the globe, his tale is an inspiration. Carole King. From 1952 until 2005, Carole King's career had a significant influence on the US and UK singles charts, solidifying her position as one of the most successful female composers. Despite her incredible artistic legacy, she's had a troubled personal life, including 2 divorces due to tragic events and unhappy marriages. Her husband's battles with substance misuse and mental illness caused verbal and physical violence in one especially tumultuous relationship. When asked about her feelings about being with someone like that, King said, "I once thought I would never be with someone like that, yet somehow I was." She said that staying in the relationship through all the upheaval had surprised her looking back. Art Garfunkel. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel were one of the most famous and adored musical partnerships of all time. They were half of the legendary duet Simon and Garfunkel. The duo had a rocky relationship, but they both went on to have solo careers. In 1990, they were both inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. On the other hand, Art had a terrifying health crisis while touring the United States as part of a Simon and Garfunkel reunion. The unexpected loss of Art's voice during a performance startled both him and the crowd. He had to pull out of the tour and take a long break from singing when a partial paralysis of his vocal cords was diagnosed, which meant he had to heal. Would it be possible for him and Paul to perform together again in the future? The outcome will be determined by the passage of time. Paul Simon. One of the most multifaceted individuals in rock music is Paul Simon, who was born on October 13, 1941, in Newark, New Jersey. He has seen psychologists on several occasions due to his battles with poor self-worth, negative thoughts, and uncertainty, despite his celebrity. In an interview from 1984, he revealed his shock at how others perceived him, saying, "Most people look at me and wonder, how could that guy be depressed? Their perception of me was more accurate than my own, I now feel." This retirement conversation isn't about giving up music, he thought as he pondered his future. "I've been gone from my family for much too long, so I'm simply attempting to spend more time with them." Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan, the iconic musician and songwriter known for classics such as "The Times They Are A-Changin'" and "Like a Rolling Stone," is doing well as he gets older, taking care of his health. But Dylan hasn't exactly been a health nut in the past. The early struggles Dylan had with drug usage, particularly, were described openly in an interview he gave in 1966. Saying, "You're still out here," he alluded to his feeling of destiny when his music career took off. "It all comes down to fate. A long time ago I made a promise, and I am still keeping it." In response to a question concerning this deal, he stated, "It was to get where I am now." Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson has gone through more sorrow than triumph in his life, yet few musicians have had such a deep impact on country music. The man behind the celebrity Nelson has been through a lot. His mother Merle's death from cancer in December 1983 was a devastating blow to his emotional health. When the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, confiscated Nelson's assets for an astounding $32 million in unpaid taxes, he later encountered a devastating financial crisis. Along with his financial security, his ranch, recording studio, and prized instruments were all taken by this confiscation. The terrible death of Nelson's children was perhaps the most devastating blow. His son Billy's suicide in 1991 was a terrible loss from which no father could ever fully recover. The death of Nelson's daughter Renee, which occurred decades later, added to the anguish that had already marred his life. Neil Sedaka. It would not be hard for Neil Sedaka's narrative to become a Hollywood blockbuster. The harrowing tale of his mother's aborted attempt marked the beginning of his troubled existence. Sedaka overcame enormous emotional and professional obstacles throughout his career by maintaining an unwavering will. The legendary Sedaka, who wrote and sang such classics as "Breaking Up Is Hard to Do," triumphed over insurmountable odds. Eleanor, Sedaka's mother, managed his career and finances when he was a young man, but she was quite domineering with her authority, and she threatened to financially isolate him whenever things weren't going her way. Both Sedaka's financial situation and his mental health were profoundly impacted by this control. His mother's influence made him feel powerless at times, and he struggled to find a balance between his job and family devotion, further straining their relationship. While Eleanor was still married, she had an affair with someone who would go on to become Neil's manager and waste all of Neil's money. Neil made peace with his mother after a time of alienation, and the two of them reconnected. Sedaka, looking back on their relationship, acknowledged that despite the difficulties, his mother's desire had ignited his own. She had a complex but crucial impact on his rise to stardom, instilling in him the resiliency and doggedness that would come to characterize his career. Neil had healed their relationship by the time Eleanor died at 89 years of age, and he treasured her memories. Kristofferson. Kristofferson is an incredibly gifted artist whose impact is seen in many mediums. He was born on June 22, 1936, in Brownsville, Texas. Still, he has had a rocky road to health in his latter years. Kristofferson began her lengthy medical journey in 1999 with triple bypass surgery. After some time had passed, doctors realized he had Lyme illness rather than Alzheimer's. He suffered greatly from this disease, which affected his memory and caused other issues. Kristofferson has shown remarkable fortitude in the face of adversity, persevering through bouts of sleep apnea, knee discomfort, and anemia, among other health problems. As they face the challenges of his health issues side by side, his wife has been an unwavering rock, providing him with the strength he needs to cope. Petula Clark. Petula Clark had an enormous impact on the music industry in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and her career, which continues to this day, covers an astounding 7 decades. Clark candidly recalls the ups and downs of her life as she reflects on her 91 years. With hits like Downtown and Don't Sleep in the Subway, she became an icon of her era and will be remembered forever in pop music. Yet being a star wasn't always a bed of roses. The toll that Clark's 3 children felt as a result of her prominence was one of the many hidden challenges that she discussed in 2013. Clark fretted over the potential effects of her job on her family and found it difficult to juggle motherhood with the pressures of celebrity. Depression hit her severely when she was famous, among other emotional challenges. Being in the limelight all the time can be exhausting and lonely, as this struggle with depression demonstrated. Nevertheless, she fearlessly faced these obstacles. Frankie Valli. No musician more completely exemplifies the term legend than Frankie Valli, although the label is not meant to be applied lightly. His presence and ability are conspicuous despite his little stature. He has maintained an outstanding career that has lately marked more than 60 years. As she continues to personify rock and roll, Frankie celebrated her 90th birthday on May 3rd. His distinctive falsetto is instantly recognizable on several popular songs, including Sherry, Big Girls Don't Cry, and Can't Take My Eyes Off You. The Four Seasons' phenomenal success, millions of records sold, and even the Broadway smash Jersey Boys, which tells the narrative of his and his bandmates' lives, may make his life appear to be a fairy tale. Underneath all the glitz and glamour, though, Frankie has suffered a great deal of personal tragedy. The death of his daughter Francine in 1980 was his biggest loss, and the expensive cost of fame pales in comparison. Her untimely death from a drug overdose left him with an unfillable emptiness that no amount of success or renown could ever alleviate. Pat Boone. Pat Boone, who was born in Jacksonville, Florida on June 1, 1934, became famous in the 1950s because to his polished appearance and versatile voice. His popular songs captured a certain innocent time in music and became cultural touchstones. Evangelical radio and television were Boone's primary areas of professional interest later in life, and he had a lasting impression on Christian media while sharing his faith with millions. The career of Boone, nevertheless, is not devoid of controversy. He faced backlash in the 50s for allegedly rehashing the rock and roll hits of African-American musicians. Some claim that Boone was exacerbating racial tensions in the music business, while others thought that his renditions were missing the original's raw, soulful edge. One result of this view is what some have dubbed the Pat Boone tragedy, in which his sanitized music and public persona are blamed for watering down rock and roll's revolutionary edge, and by extension, its original spirit. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.